This meeting will be conducted as a Zoom webinar to allow for public participation and comments. The Contra Costa Transportation Authority does not condone hate speech in any form. We continually strive to make life better for all members of our community and create an atmosphere where everyone feels a sense of safety and belonging. We ask that anyone who wishes to speak does so with civility, respect, and kindness for others. Citizens will have 3 minutes to speak. It is requested that public speakers state their names and organizations, but providing such information is voluntary. Citizens participating in person wishing to speak should submit a public speaker card to the clerk. Citizens participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone, and the chair or staff will call upon them at the appropriate time. Written public comments received in accordance with the teleconferencing special notice on the meeting agenda will be provided to the members. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they should raise their hand in Zoom or submit a public speaker card, and the chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. All written correspondence received after that and during the meeting will be entered into the record. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Commissioner Fideli?
Here.
Commissioner/Representative Glover?
Here.
Commissioner Haskew?
Here.
Commissioner Kelly?
Here.
Commissioner Meadows?
Here.
Commissioner/Representative Nowak?
Here.
Commissioner Perkins?
Here.
Commissioner Sauce?
Here.
Vice Chair Hernandez-Thorpe?
Here.
Chair Arnrich?
Here.
We do have a quorum. We have members, Commissioner Carlson and Representative Foley
Present.
and Representative Peoples absent.
Great. Thank you, Terry Ann. And now, will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. And now this is an opportunity for public comment for anything that is not on tonight's agenda. Comment specific to an agenda item will be called with each item. Terry Ann, are there any public comments written or online at this time?
We do have a virtual public comment from Susan Candell.
Okay. Let's get Susan. Okay. Susan, welcome.
Hello. Hi, I'm Susan Candell from the Lafayette City Council, and I just wanted to introduce myself because now that Councilmember Teresa Geringer is no longer with the city of Lafayette, unfortunately she moved, I'm going to be your CCTA rep. And I just wanted to say hello and want to, I'll just be watching this, observing this meeting, but just wanted to say hello to everybody.
Great. Welcome, Susan. Really nice to hear your voice again, and we look forward to seeing you in person next time.
Yes, thank you. Me too.
Great. Thank you. Terry Ann, are there any other public speakers online?
No further public comment.
Is there anybody present here in the room who would like to speak? If so, please raise your hand and we'll call you forward. Seeing none, then we'll close public comment at this time. And we have no presentations tonight. However, we do have a consent calendar. Consent calendar items that are considered routine and can be acted on by one motion, and most have been seen in committees before and recommended for approval. Is there anybody in the audience or online who would like to remove an item? Terry Ann, anything?
No public comment, written or verbal.
Right. Is there anybody on the board who wants to remove any for discussion? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Move approval. Second.
It's been moved by Luella. You know, you guys, it's the smiles and everything.
And you know what, Neil, we're going to
Seconded by
switch
Sue.
in the middle of the meeting to
Yeah,
really
oh,
confuse you.
Please don't do that. Okay, moved by Haskew, seconded by Nowak. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Terry Ann, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Fideli?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Haskew?
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly?
Aye.
Commissioner Meadows?
Aye.
Commissioner Noack?
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Sauce?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hernandez Thorpe?
Aye.
Chair Arnrich?
Aye.
Motion passes with Commissioner Carlson absent.
Great, thank you. And this will take us to our regular agenda items, and item number 8, this is under Administration Projects Committee, and the first item is going to be presented by Lindy Johnson to discuss our legislative update under item 8A. And I see Mark Thomas, Mark is here as well.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners.
I think your microphone.
Hello, good evening, Chair and Commissioners. It's my pleasure to introduce Mark Watts, who's here to provide an overview of our legislative matrix, which gives a sense of bills that we are looking to oppose, support, monitor, and work with author. He'll provide a little bit of a background as to how we came to those conclusions. We did discuss this at APC, so there's already been discussion amongst that group, but happy to bring it to the board.
Welcome, Mark.
There we go. I'm happy to report that the drive down here was very simple compared to what it was during the COVID years. So the after-work traffic is nowhere near as bad as it had been. So to get to this point, we were, between Lindy and myself, I was taking a look at all the bills as they were being introduced. I identified probably something like a first-round matrix of over 80 bills of interest, and then between the work she had with myself and with Mr. Hale, we wintered it down to about 20 bills, and of that, we're looking at about 8 or 9 that we would make some recommendations for some action on. If you didn't look at the agenda packet to ensure that the matrix is in there, but if it is, I thought I'd kind of go through this in order. And I'm going to take my glasses off so I can read what I wrote. The first 2 bills are bills that are noted work with author, but they are carryover bills from last year. They are AB 6 and AB 7, had been introduced by the then chair of the Assembly Transportation Committee. She was able to move them just so far, and they were stuck either on the Assembly floor or they made it to the Senate and weren't. They were set aside on the inactive file at that point in time. It's not clear she's going to follow this, so I would recommend taking no action now other than to note that they're a watch item or work with author, and I'll keep in touch with Lindy as we go through the next couple of months. There's no threat that they would be scheduled for a hearing because they are second-year bills in the second house or close to the second house, and those would not be taken up by the policy committees until probably June or July, so we've got plenty of time on those. I thought I'd take the 4 autonomous vehicle bills in order and then come back and cover the other bills that we have noted here. The first bill I would draw your attention to is AB 1777 by Mr. Ting from San Francisco. It was amended this past week and is set for hearing on the 22nd. The amendments now focus the bill more on, or entirely on, a requirement that autonomous vehicles have capacity built in by the manufacturers for adhering to geofencing and being able to communicate with first responders. So those are some important takeaways that the author's office had when they were looking at what happened in San Francisco. If you saw some of the articles that from earlier this year. It also, however, tightens the authority for autonomous vehicles to be charged with vehicle code violations. So right now we're recommending a monitor because it's late before the hearing, and I think we need to take a little bit deeper dive into it before we make a stronger recommendation. The next bill in order would be AB 2286. And pardon me, if there is a question while I'm running through this, I'd be glad to pause and take them at that point in time. AB 2286 by Aguirre Curry is essentially a rerun of the bill from last year, AB 316, which the governor vetoed, that dealt with autonomous vehicle, heavy-duty autonomous vehicles in excess of 10,000 pounds, requiring a safety operator to be present in the vehicle when it's under operation. This was one we would recommend and oppose, and it's set for the Assembly Communications and Conveyance Committee, which is part of Member Fideli's old committee, half of it or not, if not more. And that bill is going to be heard on the 24th of this month, next week. AB 3061 by Mr. Haney is another autonomous vehicle bill. It requires manufacturers to provide to DMV collision data, disengagement data, all those kinds of actions. It's his view of what occurred in San Francisco with a couple of those incidents, and he's attempting to deal with it in this manner. It too was amended earlier in the month, April 6th. It is scheduled for communications and conveyance. I stumble over that every time, and it's set to be heard next week. The next one would be one, I know there was a lot of interest in this when we discussed it at APC. It's SB 915 by the new Senate Committee, Transportation Committee Chair, Mr. Cortese, and it allows cities and counties to set local ordinances on controlling autonomous vehicles within their jurisdiction. That bill has passed local government committee already, and it's on its way to trans in the Senate. I think that's right. I mean, it is in the Senate, I'm sorry. I don't have the correct date here, so I'm not going to read that out loud. And that would be a bill that we would recommend work with author. So those were the 4 autonomous vehicle bills, the Ting bill, the Aguirre-Curry bill, the Haney bill, and the Cortese bill. So in addition to those, there were a couple of bills that have been very challenging for the transportation, RTPAs, MPOs, the construction industry, and allied labor to deal with. The first one is AB 2086. It started off as a bill that was going to identify the core 4 projects or core 4 principles and put them into law. The core 4 principles were developed by Caltrans to guide their vision as they move forward in picking projects and where they're going to emphasize their priorities. And a lot of folks didn't think you should take away the flexibility for the administration to have core 4 or core 5 or core 6 or go back to core 3. So there was a long series of discussions where they convinced the author to no longer deal with it that way, but basically to update the Rebuilding California website that Caltrans controls. It's a very data-heavy and data-laden summary of SB1 and other programs, where projects are and status of projects. I encourage folks to take a look at it sometime. But the bill would now say, or direct Caltrans to update it with data, and taking a look at the data, not just from SB1 perspective and how we did with that, but to also take a look at how the projects that Caltrans is doing would line up with the California Transportation Plan, CTP 50, the goals that are outlined there. This was just amended yesterday, and the industry and labor are going to go neutral on the bill, and the bill is set for the 22nd. The next measure I wanted to bring to your attention is, where did 2535 go?
Bonta's bill.
Yeah, here we go. I'm sorry. It's Ms. Bonta's bill. It dealt with the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program and said that would have prohibited projects that are awarded a TCEP grant by the state to also use the funds to expand capacity in the section of the corridor that the Trade Corridor Program is trying to fund. That has now been modified, and the amendments are going to be available when I get back to the office there. I heard they were put in print today, and I was not able to pull them out. The bill, as it had been introduced, was recommended for opposed. I'll be coordinating with Lindy on what the new set of amendments achieve and how they accomplish goals that the author and the chair of the Assembly Trans Committee have worked out. The last two bills I would highlight is SB 768 by Senator Caballero. That bill has gone through the Senate and is pending referral in the Assembly. And it calls for a VMT study by CARB to look at how VMT has dealt with or has achieved goals that were set within the for projects that have been completed or through which the environmental document has been completed. So it's going to look at the metrics underlying VMT to see if it's actually reducing traffic or impacting transportation mobility issues. And that bill was recommended for support. The last bill would be Senator Glazier's SB 827, and that establishes or creates the office or enhances the office of BART Inspector General. And that bill is, I don't have a date for that one, I apologize for that. So those are the bills that are the ones that were called out of the 80 down to 20 down to these 9 or 10, two of which would be held over till later this year. So I completed my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, Mark, thank you. Are there questions or comments, discussion on these bills, any of these at this time? Renata or anything? Yes.
Yeah,
Renata.
thank you, Mr. Chair. Mark, thank you very much. On 9/15, and I unfortunately was ill and missed the APC meeting, which I would have asked this question. What is our thinking behind taking a work with author position? In other words, what do we believe can change in this bill that would be acceptable?
Well, there was a broad set of discussions at APC, if I recall correctly, Mr. Fideli.
Yeah, and I apologize that I missed that.
No, it's okay. And so I think it was, we were looking for more direction as a unit. So I think what I would recommend in this case, because a number of communities around the state are taking support positions, but there are some issues within it that are causing some pause. So it's not a clean decision, and I think your staff and I need to get you a better handle, a more discrete analysis of the bill.
Yeah, and we're all for local control, obviously, as elected officials from local municipalities. The concern, at least at first blush on this one, is creating a patchwork of regulations that are inconsistent or incoherent. And that would be my concern.
And in response, I would say, when I first saw the bill, it appeared to me to be a lot like the taxi legislation from a few years ago, which too would have created that patchwork. And that is a concern because it's going to be difficult for the companies trying to operate or for people who are trying to use the facilities. Anyway, thank you.
Maybe Commissioner Sauce, maybe I can weigh in just for a minute there. I think with the work with author position, I think we're obviously going to be monitoring the bill very closely and looking for opportunities to potentially, maybe potentially narrow the bill. Obviously, the bill is very much about safety, which I think we want to maintain the integrity of that concept in the bill in terms of safety. But I think it's also looking at, rather than this affecting all autonomous vehicles, and to Mr. Watt's point, is what's the true intent of the bill, and is it really responding what's happening in San Francisco from a robotaxi standpoint, or is it really the intent to focus on all autonomous vehicles? And I think that's where we need to look at in terms of, maybe potentially narrowing the bill, or potentially looking at it from the standpoint of different regulatory environments, because right now it's based on the amendments, it includes any autonomous vehicle that either gets a DMV and a Public Utility Commission permit, And so in that particular case, this bill would apply to glideways, for example, right, which is not even on public roads, with the way it's written today. And so I think we're just taking a real close look at it in terms of how it's going to impact projects, but obviously with the mindset that the real true intent here is safety.
I think I would add, I spoke to actually, several times to one of the lobbyists that's supporting this. And he said, bottom line was, he wanted to get people to the table. And that was the reason for the broad, overreaching, well, you're right, we think as cities, oh, let's have local control, but this is like having to have a driver's license for every city that you go to according to their rules. And one of the suggestions, Tim had suggested this and others, that, you know, this ought to be narrowed to like robo-taxis and doing the regulation that goes along with that. And the lobbyists really indicated they just wanted to have a conversation about the safety factors and what is it. There seems to be a lack of general knowledge within some municipalities of how the process even worked. How did they go through it? What were those standards? And also waiting for NHTSA to come out with standards, which they haven't yet. I think the concern is how to get this to fit to deal with the real problems there and not just this broad brush overreach. So I think that was part of our discussion. Paul will weigh in a second, but it was to get to a more reasonable approach and deal with the real problem and make sure that there are standards. And when we were back in DC, you know, asking NHTSA, when are you going to come out with these standards? They were a little vague on when they were, but they're working hard to do that so that there would be a national transportation standard, say your vehicles have to have this, these are the safety devices. Right now, that is left up to DMV and the other entity. So, Paul?
Yeah, thank you. I do think at this time, this is a great and a fair place to be, work with the author. Not only because, you know, most of us are dealing with our league, our Cal Cities, and it's one of their priority bills, and our county newspaper came out strongly opposed to it. So I think there are ways we can look at this bill to look at what really impacts us. And I think Tim and I and others have talked about, you know, there may be not forcing, but changing to a county regulation rather than cities, or sunsetting the bill, or coming up with a optional regulation rather than requiring that, or some things we should just consider. But I think right now, and I'm not sure, but I heard it was in transportation today. Was it? I heard on the news that it was actually up for a hearing today. I was wondering no one else has heard that? Okay. Okay. Anyway. There is? There's not. Okay. Okay. Monday, Tuesday. Okay.
And they are looking to our agency specifically for input. Yeah, because
Next Tuesday.
the perception is we are the only entity in the state of California that's really deeply involved in this. So I think that was kind of the logic behind this. But
Okay. Well, thank you. That answer, and thank you for all that background. That's very helpful, Mr. Chair.
okay.
And I just had one
Paul,
more.
please.
I just wanted to compliment staff for the matrix. I really think it's great, and it allows us to research right there on our website, whether about the author or about the bill. That just really helps a whole lot.
Yeah.
And I think it really works well. So thank you for that. It makes our own research and reading on our laptops really nice. I just wanted to say, if we are going to take a vote on all these or independently tonight, is that what we're moving? AB 316, I had taken a abstain on. I would like to be recorded as abstaining on AB 2286, if in fact I can be recorded in that direction. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or yes?
Chair Arnridge, thank you.
Yes, Mark.
I just wanted to give you a bit of an update on SB 827, which is the BART Inspector General. So we have taken a support if amended position from the BART Board, and the two amendments that we are seeking is one, to actually give the Office of the Independent Inspector General subpoena power, so that they can actually bring folks in as witnesses. And the other piece that we've asked is concerns over some potential conflicts around the independence of our Office of the Independent Police Auditor and Office of Civil Rights. So we have brought those to Senator Glazier and expressed our concerns or desires over those two pieces. And just to let you know, I was told today it's going to be heard next Wednesday, the 24th.
Mark, thank you. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
The second two, I don't personally, the second two items I probably wouldn't support, but on the first item, what did Senator Glazer indicate on that one?
We are waiting to hear back. There have
Okay,
been
so
no
we have not-
amendments as of yet.
Okay. All right, thank you. And Sue?
I wanted to comment quickly on 1031, which is the enabling legislation for MTC for a bond measure. There are amendments that came out last night. I have not read them yet. So, but my understanding is some of the amendments, at least in the consolidation portion of the bill, are going in the right direction for our transit agencies. So they're obviously listening to some of the feedback they're getting. Again, haven't had a chance to read all the amendments, and we'll probably be discussing it more in the future, but at least
Great.
they're heading in the right direction on the consolidation piece.
Thank you very much. Good. So before we take any action, any further questions on this? Is there anybody, we'll open up public comments. Is there anybody either virtually or written comments who'd like to make comments on this item?
No public comment, virtual or in person,
Okay, nobody here in person?
or
All right.
written.
Okay, thank you. We will then close the public hearing. Lindy, how do you want us to do this? Are you asking for us to go through each one of these? Or do we want to do the whole list and just take exceptions so we don't have to go through a...
Yeah, so the request was for us to move forward the recommendation that came from APC, which was to approve the matrix all at once or as a package.
Okay.
Given that we are approving these bills as written at the time they were brought to APC, and as Mark mentioned, there's been serious amendments on many of these, so we may be able to bring it back in May adjusted.
Is everybody good with that? And
I
Sorry.
think we could go through and just do all but accept.
Right, and what we could do is do a motion to accept this, and then if there are exceptions to that, they can note that, and we can note that for the record.
There you go.
Does that work? Okay. Is there somebody who'd like to make a motion?
I'll move the item.
Sue, thank you. Okay, it's been moved by Noack, seconded by Federal. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Terry Ann, will you call the roll, please?
Yeah, can I just confirm the ones that Commissioner Fideli will be abstaining? You said Assembly Bill 2286?
Just one.
Okay, just the one?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I will do two motions and note that. Commissioner Fideli? I'll do two, we'll do one vote, but I'll do two motions, if that's okay, and I'll notate the abstentions on the Assembly Bill 2286 for you.
Aye.
Okay. Commissioner Glover?
Yes.
Commissioner Haskew?
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly?
Aye.
Commissioner Meadows?
Aye.
Commissioner Noack?
Yes?
Commissioner Perkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Sauce?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hernandez Thorpe?
I'm sorry, I have to ask a question. So are we clear yet on 1031 and how the funding mechanism for that?
The funding mechanism will be put in the legislation in a very broad manner, and the details will be worked out. When we went through the overall framework with the senators when I was there last week, the detailed framework would not fit in the legislation. But at this point, the intent is for the years 1 through 5, there would be a 70% return to source. Now, while it says 70% return to source, some of that return to source is going toward a share of the deficit of different transit agencies, whether it be BART, SFMTA, AC Transit, Golden Gate, anyways, at Caltrain. So those are, and they're distributed differently.
And then what is what would then be the 30%?
So the
Who controls that?
MTC, but some portion of that initially will also go toward the deficit of the entity. It's quite a complicated chart. But the idea is, at a minimum, every county will get 70% back And at this point, there's a range from $1 billion to $1.5 billion measure. Contra Costa goes, I believe, from about 40 million to about 70 million return to source in actual monies we would get per year. So there's still some details to be worked on, and I'm spending a bit of time arguing on this point. And Glacier was very, concerned making sure that Contra Costa got its fair share. And so but the details are not part of the legislation, just the general framework is.
And that's why we have a monitor, because the suggestion is that we don't want to cut ourselves off before, I mean, a measure may pass,
No,
whether we vote for it or not.
Right. And
Just make sure that we have those.
just seems like mission creep here.
Yes.
By MTC, and I'm concerned that, we're paying for this toll.
So
We're paying for the toll that's paying for San Francisco.
Well,
And this sounds
so
like another San Francisco bill.
RM3 is different from this. So RM3.
No, I understand
Yeah.
that. I understand that. I'm thinking of the numbers. I'm thinking of vacancy rate in San Francisco. I'm thinking that we have to pay more, again, to bail out these transit agencies in San Francisco with our tax dollars. And we're getting what may appear like our fair share with 70% that's broken down through all these different agencies. To me, just doesn't seem to work out.
So let me put it this way. The only deficit that we will be providing a benefit for would be a small piece of AC Transit and BART. We would not be funding SFMTA. We're not funding.
But we don't know that.
Deficit. We do know that.
But you don't have.
But it's just
but we
not
don't
going
know
to be
about
in this legislation.
But we don't know about this 30%.
So the 30%, yeah.
That's controlled by MTC.
Right.
So we don't know where that money is going to go.
No. So
Okay.
after, no, not exactly. We do somewhat. So, and then at year 6, I should have said, after year 6, it's 80% return to source, a minimum of 80% return to source. So there is some discussion at that point that more of that deficit has to be covered by the entities themselves. So I have spent a lot of time making sure that Contra Costa is not unduly burdened at all with the dollars, and that we certainly get our fair share, and that the allocation process is, because it's not just even as simple as saying this is our number. There's a whole bunch of different methodologies. That is going to be discussed over the next year or two. So it's not part of this bill. It will be discussed later on, before the measure happens in 2026.
I get it. It's not part of this bill.
Right.
But MTC will decide.
Well, that hasn't even been finalized, because it's changed 3 times in the last 3 weeks. It's all they've indicated to the legislature is that they want to make sure it's 70% return to source. Past that, there will be more discussions in more details. So that's, and yeah, and some of that, needs to be, some of this is a regional transportation network. And some of it needs to be funded in a regional basis rather than just an individual county by individual county. I mean, that's been a large part of the discussion, is you can see where stations are, but you don't necessarily know where all the people are coming from. People drive down from Napa and Solano and take BART, right? So it benefits the whole region to have a regional network, not just those entities that have lines that go through it. So there's a lot of discussion how much should be allocated to the region in general versus individual counties. That is part of the reason why you've got the 70% return to source too, is because of that. Because part of this is just a regional network. So anyway, that's where we stand right now. Yep.
So if you can note my exception for 331. I don't.
331.
I'm not clear where I'm at with
1031.
1031. And for everything else is an aye.
So you'll be abstaining from
that, yeah.
the position on 1031. Okay. I will note that. I will do three different actions on this item. Okay. So, Chair Arnridge, Motion passes unanimously with Commissioner Carlson absent, and then Commissioner Fideli abstaining on Assembly Bill 2286, and Vice Chair Hernandez Thorpe abstaining on either Assembly Bill or Senate Bill 1031. Senate Bill 1031, okay.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank
And please note to all of us here that this is the position we were recommending at this point in time. We will get updates, and as it changes, either favorably or not, it'll come back to us to make a more appropriate stance as it comes forward. Sue and Federal, both thank you for all your work. It's a lot of work you're putting into this. Okay, great. And Mark, Lindy, anything else?
No, thank you.
Guys. All right, thank you very much. Okay, the next item will be presented by Ivan Ramirez to discuss the award of an agreement for project program management services for the construction program. And this is item number 8B. Ivan, welcome.
I'm sorry about that, Commissioner. Thank you. Good evening, Commissioner. Yes, my name is Ivan Ramirez, and I'm the Director of Construction, and this is an action item. The authority traditionally has had a very robust construction program, primarily heavy civil, and we all have relied on consultants to provide support to us since we're such a small staff. That contract is up for renewal at the end of June of this year. So with that in mind, we asked the board to approve the release of a request for proposals at the December 2023 meeting. And 3 firms responded to that RFP, being Zoom Engineering, Coal Management Engineering, and 3Built. And as part of the selection process, we had oral interviews on March 5th of 2024. And the panelists were myself and Stephanie Hugh and Hisham Noaimi, the other directors of the project staff. And as a result of that process, we selected Zoom Engineering as the top firm. CME is second, he's the incumbent, they are the incumbent, and they came in second, and 3Built came last. The request is to approve this contract. This contract is going to go all the way through June 30th of 2029. With you approving the agreement today, we're going to bring Zoom Engineering as soon as possible to begin that transition from CME to Zoom. And the value of the contract is $4 million, so it's $4 million over 5+ years. And the staff report outlines the selection criteria. They were based on qualifications, related experience, and references. That was 35%. Proposed staffing and project organization, that was 35%. And the approach of how they were going to help us manage the program, and that was 30%. One of the things about the construction program is that we're definitely going to continue to have heavy civil works in the state highway system. We'll continue to do that. But in addition to that, we're moving to other type of projects like the Safe Streets for All project, the mobility hubs, the signal coordination projects, the coordination around metering projects, and we're also going to be assisting local agencies in the county doing complete streets type of projects. And Zoom, basically, those elements of the proposal came out high, and that's another reason why they're selected. So with that, I am open to any question, and we also have Anthony Goro here. He is the assistant project manager. You want to raise your hand in case you have any questions for him as well? And with that, I'm open to any questions.
Ivan, thank you for that. Could you just describe, I know it personally, but could you just describe a little bit about the firm, where they're located?
Yeah, the firm is located in Alameda County. I think it's Emeryville. Is that right? Emeryville, yes. And I have known one of the principals of the firm. His name is Zaid, since I was working in the Bay Bridge back in the early 2000s. And when I left, he took over my role. Then I think he went on his own, and he's been with this firm. You know, he created his firm with 2 other partners. And they do a lot of work on the state highway system. Like one of their most successful projects has been the express lanes in San Mateo County. So they were doing the CM over there, the support. And they also have an interesting project with MTC. Remember those lights on the Bay Bridge that were coming up and down? Well, that was that firm that did all that work, and they're working on the next phase of that project. And they're, one of the things that we also liked about them is that they have a lot of breadth. There's 35 employees in the firm, so I think that there's a lot of resources that we can tap into, specialty type of work. So those are some of the overview of the firm, Commissioner.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Evan. Any questions of staff at this time? Seeing none, we'll open up the public hearing. Terry Ann, is there any written comments or anybody online?
No public comment, written or verbal.
Great. Is there anybody here in the room who would like to make any public comments? Seeing none, then we'll close the public hearing on this. And is there any further discussion and/or a motion?
So moved.
So moved. I wanted to say like the real thing, like we do at the city council.
You're not doing it perfect.
I skipped that part. Just go to so moved. It's so much easier.
So moved.
Second.
Is there a second?
I wanted to be a team player.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. There was so much noise over here. Okay, it's been, it's a little dense in this part. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Terry Ann, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Fideli?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover? Aye. Commissioner Haskew?
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly?
Aye.
Commissioner Meadows?
Aye.
Commissioner Nowak?
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Sauce?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hernandez-Thorpe?
Aye.
Chair Arnrich? Motion passes unanimously with Commissioner Carlson absent. He just came in. I thought there was like a 718 number.
Thank you. Yeah, that is a rookie move, yeah. Item 8C, this item is going to be introduced also by Ivan Ramirez to discuss the settlement amendment to the 2022 Measure J strategic plan and the use of the fund exchange reserve funds for Phase 3 of Interstate 680 State Route 4 Interchange Improvement Project. Ivan, welcome back.
Thanks again, Commissioner. And this is another action item, and this is related to the project at the interchange of 680 State Route 4, Phase 4. That project, we awarded the contract to Brossamer and Wall back in October 2018. We issued notice to proceed in November of 2018. Construction ended in fall of 2021. And unfortunately, we did receive 21 claims from this contractor asking for additional compensation. And once we found ourselves in this position, we asked the board to approve a contract with legal counsel. We hired Theodora Oringer, so that's our litigation counsel. And tonight here is our lead counsel, Brian Hedman, and he's going to talk to you about what we're asking you to do here and provide some thoughts about how we should proceed here. So Brian, thank you for coming, and hopefully we can hear you soon here.
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. Brian Hedman from Theodore Oringer. I'm glad to be before you tonight. As Ivan mentioned, upon completion of the project, CCTA was faced with 21 claims from its contractor, Brossamer and Wall, or BWI. Those claims totaled over $18.2 million, seeking extra costs for delay-related alleged costs, differing site conditions, and extra work. The authority disputes those claims and has defended them, and the authority maintains its own claims against BWI for approximately $4.2 million in delay-related liquidated damages. On February 5th, 2024, prior to the initiation of any litigation, the authority and BWI participated, and with the excellent support of Ivan Ramirez and his project team, we conducted a mediation with mediator Ken Gibbs. Through that mediation, the authority was able to negotiate a reduced value settlement opportunity in the amount of $9,750,000. That settlement opportunity presents a global opportunity to resolve all claims as between the authority and BWI. It would eliminate all future risk related to claims for extra cost and delay by BWI, as well as any subcontractors or material suppliers. And it would also present an opportunity to avoid the time and cost, both financial and personnel investment into a litigation matter. So before the board this evening is a settlement and release agreement for the board's decision. The staff report is to approve that settlement agreement and to grant the authority to the executive director to execute that on behalf of the authority. And I'm here and happy to take any questions that the commissioners may have. Thank you.
Brian, thank you, and thank you for all the work to help us get us to this point. Are there any questions of commissioners? Scott?
Tim or Ivan, could you describe a little bit, was this an unusually large amount of claims, and is this customary to get, on a contract of $80 million, we get almost $20 million in claims?
So all my time I've been here, we have never really had any formal claims submitted, and we built, tens of millions of dollars worth of work, hundreds of millions of dollars. So no, it's very unique to this project, and also the amount of, like you said, the value of the claims with respect to the base contract was significant. But there was a lot of things that went on this project, and we brought a lot of updates to the board as to why we were, we are where we are.
And maybe Commissioner Perkins, I just add that, relative to the amount of issues that were on this project, relative to the percentage of that over the base, compared to the overall base contract, is not unusual. And so if you look at the number of change orders, the size of the project, the base project, it was probably a little bit on the I'll say above average, but generally consistent with what we've seen on large, complex projects like this one.
So this included change orders in addition to other kinds of claims?
Yeah.
This included the change orders?
Well,
because change orders should be pretty straightforward.
No. So it's base plus the change orders and then the claim.
Yeah, the point that they're making, Scott, is that in past presentations, we've seen this where the job required a lot of change orders that we generated and the project itself generated, and those were done one by one. The extent of the changes in the settlement represents the cost incurred by the contractor by the sum total of all of those. That you can look at each individual item, and the reason that we came to the agreement was because in sum total plus our litigation cost, that this became a fair and reasonable settlement to that. And it does have an extraordinary number of changes. And when you plan a project and you expect 20 change orders, and if you have 10 times that, it makes your work plan more difficult. And there were extenuating circumstances on both sides. So it was presented as a fair and reasonable. Contractor was not happy. We were not happy about this. But with Brian's expertise and the recommendation of the mediator, it got us to a conclusion. And we've been working on this for a long time. So we look at it from the total depth where we are. It is not unusual, as Tim said. It's a project that had unusual circumstances, that when you go out and look at every soil condition, you don't do that. On a new project, it's easy to do that. For example, the project that we're doing for you and your community, we could sample everywhere we had a new item going in. On an existing interchange where you're creating and widening it and doing it parallel and joining, there are a lot of unknowns that you have to deal with. And I think this project, to nobody's fault per se, represents one of those projects. So renovation projects of a freeway, complicated freeway interchange, is challenging. So.
Does this also include Anything from Bay Cities? I noticed that was mentioned in the staff report, but Bay Cities is not a party to the, explicitly a party to the agreement.
I'll take that one. This will resolve any potential claims by Bay Cities or any other subcontractor or supplier. So this is a full and final resolution that eliminates all future risk related to the project and the contractor or subcontractors.
Yeah, good question.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this point? Seeing none, we'll open up the public hearing. Is there any written comment or online comment? Terry Ann?
No public comment, written or verbal.
Great, thank you. Is there anybody here present who would like to make public comment on this item? Seeing none,
Can I make a comment, Commissioner? So,
Oh,
well,
you're
I
not
just
the
want to.
public. Of course you can make a comment.
I just
Ivan.
want to thank Theodora Oringer and particularly Brian Hedman, because I think that we're either lucky or good, but they did an outstanding job walking us through this process and getting us to the result that we are now. So I just want to give a shout out to them for that and
Agreed.
the
Well
rest of
done.
our consultant staff.
Yeah, thank you for that. Okay, we've officially closed the public hearing. Any further discussion and/or is there a motion?
I would move the item. This has been a very difficult litigation, and certainly this is splitting the baby, so I would move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
So it's been moved by Clever, seconded by Haskew. Any further comments? Seeing none, Terry Ann, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Fideli?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Haskew?
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly?
Aye.
Commissioner Meadows?
Aye.
Commissioner Nowak?
Yes?
Commissioner Perkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Sauce?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hernandez Thorpe?
Aye.
Chair Arnrich? Motion passes unanimously with Commissioner Carlson absent.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Ying Smith, Director of Mobility Programs. So this evening, I'm here to present to you the final report of the feasibility study for ferry service expansion. And before I start, I would like to recognize staff from the Water Emergency Transportation Authority, WETA. I think we have Seamus and Mike. Oh, Mike. Good to see you. And we also have members from the consultant team from McDonald, Jean, and Dory on the Zoom to support us. And here's the outline of this presentation. It's quite a bit of information. The staff report has some details, as well as the final study report. The draft final is in the packet for your review. Second, you share screen. Oh, here you go. You didn't miss any slides. Let me just go back one. Is the, oh, sorry. I don't know how to move on. Oh, I think we're going to just jump ahead. First, the presentation will give you an overview of the project scope, schedule, as well as the study location. So just a little bit background, we began the study in April 2023, and the purpose of the study is to identify potential ferry service scenarios for each of the 4 cities that participated, including Hercules, Martinez, Pittsburgh, and Antioch. The study team estimated capital and operating costs to implement ferry services and analyze the potential ferry terminal sites in the context of existing and planned land use development and transportation investments. The study also provides the party the necessary information to make informed decisions regarding any future investment in expanded ferry services in Contra Costa County. And the study includes 4 tasks as we outlined here, and I'm going to walk you through the findings from the study. So first, there's a map to show you the kind of orient ourselves with the 4 cities in the study and the relationship to San Francisco, as well as the existing services provided by both WITA as well as Golden Gate Transit. Here, I want to just set the stage of the approach, how we conduct the study, and some of the assumptions we make. So the study you can see as is a benefit cost analysis. We start with the benefits, and first is to serve the riders, the transit ridership potential. And then besides that, we also want to look at how the additional transit connections to serve our communities, especially the equity priority communities. Besides the transit benefits, ferry studies could have indirect benefits to promote waterfront access and economic development. And of course, there's always the reduced auto trips between the points and reduced greenhouse gas emissions. On the cost side, we'll look at capital, first operating cost and capital cost, as well as the vessel procurement cost, the dredging cost in both at the initial stage as well as the annual maintenance dredging. So I want to start with on the benefit side, the demand potential. In a more typical study, one would probably use the travel demand forecasting model to project the ridership. In this case, we evaluate different options. We chose not to use the model, mostly due to the ever-shifting travel trends as a result of the pandemic. Instead, we chose the concept of demand potential and by evaluating several factors, such as residential and job densities, as well as the existing transit and active transportation connections. All those factors will eventually contribute to transit ridership. So it's an indirect way to measure it, but give us a more flexible terminology to use. In all cases,
excuse me, is it possible to remove the ferry that's blocking the top of the right-hand column so we know what that right-hand column is?
Oh.
Yeah. It's okay. Well, you don't know you're not missing anything until you know what you're missing.
Oh, it says ferry location 1. While Terran is helping me, I just want to note one thing is, in all cases, we use the Richmond service as the benchmark, as a comparison. Each city was compared to Richmond.
If you move that, if it's movable, you can move it to the lower right-hand corner probably and have it, nope, doesn't move.
Yeah.
Technology.
For
I don't have it on my iPad.
and on that particular slide, it says location 1. So hopefully that doesn't block other slides, because that's actually is a pretty good corner for us to put the room there. Is a lightly used corner, except for the last slide. So after we finish, let's see, right after we talk about the methodology in the demand potential, we want to share with you how we estimate the capital cost. On the capital side, we look at the land side improvements, water side, and cost share in the new operating and maintenance facilities. And all those 3 big items add up to the total capital cost. And on the land side, just want to reference that we actually base a lot of work on the study that was conducted in 2015 by CCTA's called Financial Feasibility Study for the ferry expansion. So that was our base. And then we used that to conduct additional analysis to get to the landside capital cost. So here I want to just share with you, we also look at dredging. There's dredging needs at most of the locations. So not only there's a need to do the initial dredging, but also look at the annual maintenance. And later on, we will talk about, we use 2 vessel types in all our analysis. One is recommended by WITA, which is the Dorado family. The other one is a private operator's vessel called Billy J. So the different vessel types, because they really, they're different in sizes. So that's very, very important for us to look at a bigger vessel versus a lighter, smaller one. So on the operating cost, as I just mentioned, there are 2 vessels we look at, and we look at 3 service levels, 1, 2, 3. I can just start with 3. Level 3 is the same service level as today's Richmond service. That's all day during the week as well as weekend service. And the next level down, which is level 2, is an all-day service on weekdays only. Level 1 is almost the minimum service level we can provide, which is a peak service only on weekdays.
Excuse me, Ying. So level 3 is what Richmond is doing currently.
Correct.
Which one of these levels would represent what they did before the recent change?
You can see level 1 is more like when they started, when it was just weekday only and peak hour only.
Okay, so service level 1 matches what they originally had.
Yeah, back in 2019, yeah. So we, granted that when we talk about service scenarios and costs, there are many, many versions, right? We really want to simplify it at 3 service levels by 2 vessel types. So we still get 6 numbers. So the 2 vessels just give people visual, that's what they look like. And you can see the Dorado vessel is a lot bigger, it's a 320. It's a very, very suitable vessel to be operated on the bay. WITA has a lot of experience, that's what they have in many of their lines. Then there are other factors in this vessel consideration. The POP SF vessel is Billy J, is a much smaller vessel, and the cost is also lower. And this is what similar to the vessel they use for the Treasure Island service today. And we kind of look at those 2 choices like 2 bookends, right? One is a much bigger one, the other one is quite smaller. And the purchase cost is also very significant, and that will come out into play as we move along talk about the cost side. So I want to share with you some of the basic information, the travel time at each location to San Francisco as like just a 2-point kind of operations. And the number of vessels needed to provide the service. In all 3 service levels, the peak vessel demand is the same because the peak is what drives your vessel peak demand. So you can see today, Richmond, they use 3 vessels. Hercules, they can also run the same level with 3. The number goes up as we travel further west. Oh, sorry. That's before my trip. I even got my direction wrong already. So I have to go back a little bit on the demand potential. So as I mentioned, each city was compared with Richmond based on those factors. The travel demand to San Francisco, how competitive is ferry compared to other transit modes, and how competitive the ferry mode is compared to driving. And we also look at jobs and housing in the vicinity, and we look at other transit as well as active transportation connections. So the color coding here, the cream color means, I think on your screen is pretty much like, you can't quite see it. We can say that look for that city, for that particular factor, it will perform at about the same level as the Richmond service. All the colors in blue, that means for that particular factor, the city performs at a higher level. And color in any dots in orange, that means it would likely perform lower compared to Richmond. So you can see, this is not necessarily a comparison, but we want to just show you all the locations all on the same sheet. An easy conclusion is for all 4 cities, each dump have some pluses and minuses. And at the end, it's like a mixed bag for each city. There's, it's kind of hard to tell whether there's a city that scores higher compared to Richmond. They all have pluses and minuses. And again, this really gives people like a general idea without running the travel demand forecasting model.
Travel demand was common amongst all of them as being low. So if you have a low travel demand, unless we have a better way of estimating that to see if there really is a higher demand, none of these make sense if you don't have anybody showing up to use your ferry.
That's the purpose of the study, is to look at all of those, yes. That's a good observation.
Yeah, good observation, yeah. So now we want to look at the annual operating cost. I think we have, at the PC meeting, we have more details for each city, but here we want to really give you a summary. Overall, you can see as we go from Hercules to Martinez, Pittsburgh, and Antioch, the cost does go up to provide the same level of service. And there's also the difference between WITA's Dorado, using that Dorado vessel versus using the POP SF model. So knowing that one is a much bigger vessel, the other one is smaller, right? So there's a cost difference between those 2 vessel choices. So again, here we want to run the numbers to give you a sense and also give you the 2 vessel options as a comparison. And just keep in mind, like, ferry services are always very expensive in most, probably in all settings throughout the country, throughout the world. It is, given today's technology, it is likely to be a more expensive mode to operate. But in most cases, the ferry vessels carry many passengers, right? Up to 320 in the Dorado model. So that's a much bigger capacity compared to buses. So we want to go to talk a little bit in the capital cost. And first want to look at Hercules. City of Hercules staff asked us to look at 2 locations for terminal choices. One is called the Point, the other one is called the Hub. And we ran the numbers for both. And so without going into details, you can see the cost can range between $46 million to $60 million. And plus, in addition, there's also the cost to purchase the vessels. That is 3 vessels with the per vessel cost, plus a 20% fair, it's called spare ratio, that we need to put into the cost. And there's details in the report of what items are included, but I don't need to go into the details, what items are included in each cost number. So then moving to Martinez. Martinez will only look at one. The city asked us to look at only one choice. And so you can see every location is different. Their costs seem to be a little bit lower on the land side as well as water side improvements. And Pittsburgh, there are 2 terminal locations under consideration, but for us to run the cost estimates, the Bay Walk location, the city didn't have enough information for us to do the cost estimate, but we do have enough information to run the numbers for the Martinez location. In the case of Pittsburgh, there's no need to do dredging, so that's really a plus for the Pittsburgh location. Antioch is similar. There's no dredging needs, but there's also quite a bit of cost for capital improvements. So after seeing all the numbers, we do want to talk a little bit about other future vessel choices in the future. And as a part of the study, we were asked to look at the 0 or low emission vessel choices. Unfortunately, there's really, given today's technology, there's no 0 emission vessel available for the services we're looking at. And the CARB regulation requires 0 emission vessels for trips under 3 miles. So the locations we're looking at don't have to comply with this requirement at this point. Despite some limitations on zero-emission vessels, WITA has a very robust program, and they have been successful in getting grant funds for them to start the transition to zero emission. And they have some exciting programs going on. So we do include information in our study. I think that's, and of course there are other vessel choices. We did like just look at those briefly, but not really diving into details besides the zero emission options. The other part we'll look at is funding sources. So we list the very busy table to list some of the potential funding sources at different levels, federal, state, local, or regional, and whether they're suitable for capital improvements or suitable for operations. So I don't want to just highlight 2 of them. Those 2 are dedicated for ferry services. So actually, what I learned is in the ferry world, there are actually more funds available relatively, like compared to bus and rail. The 2 that are dedicated for ferry programs are both from the FTA, the Federal Transit Administration. Both are for capital projects only. The first one is for any kind of capital projects. And the second one, the electric or low-emitting ferry pilot, those are specifically set aside for the low-emission ferry vessel choices. In FY 22-23, FTA awarded more than $50 million for several projects, actually 7 projects in several states. So there is some potential for getting grant funds to support ferry services in the future. And here I would like to just highlight the stakeholder engagement. There is quite a lengthy process and have a pretty big group, and we have a lot of interest from city staff and elected officials. So we really appreciate that kind of input and help us really work hard on the study and look for some creative way to do our analysis and prepare the report. And to close, I want to just highlight, introduce with you the WITA's pilot program. In the current fiscal year, WITA set aside $2 million for pilot services. And their board has formed a subcommittee to guide staff in the future work to prepare ferry projects. And we have been in close conversations with WITA staff, and they are very, very supportive of what we really want to form this partnership to look for some potential pilots, potentially in Contra Costa County. So we hope the study will help support that process to continue for us to engage with our staff to continue in our effort. So that concludes my presentation, and happy to answer your questions.
Great. Ying, thank you very much for that. Just real quick before we go to Chris. The one thing I don't see here, and I guess I look at it now every time I look at transit, somebody who's providing it, what's the subsidized cost per trip? It'd be an interesting way to look. I mean, I happen to point out AC Transit, for example, in Bay Area is one of the most cost-effective per passenger trips on what is being subsidized. It's another way to look at it. While ferry service is important to have it in the toolbox and to have it as an alternative, because we also have to think about emergency planning and things like that. So it would be good to start to include analysis. What's it costing per passenger? Because the world we're living in now, it's really about dollars and cents. Where should we put our money to get the most cost-effective way and environmentally responsible way? So it might be a food for thought. Chris?
Yes, Ying, thank you very much, and thank you to Mott MacDonald for this study. You know, you've done a wonderful job really digging into the details, and I really, really appreciate it, and I thank all of CCTA staff. So from the point of view of my city, the city of Hercules, one thing the study pointed out very clearly was the fact that we can't use the point where our city is, and we'd have to bring, eventually, if we have a ferry, we'd have to bring it into our hub where the train stop will be. And because of the cost of dredging, that these two kinds of ferries, either like the Dorado or the Billy J, are just not going to work. So new technologies, that's something that Hercules is really looking at. I know WIDA is looking at that. And so we may look at hydrofoil, or we may look more likely at hovercraft or something like that. So from the point of view of Hercules, we're not ready for any kind of ferry service now, but we certainly hold out hope in the future, and we're going to put our efforts into getting the train to stop. Meanwhile, the developer around our hub will be building up to 1,400 units of housing, and so maybe by the time that is done, you know, new technologies will emerge, and, you know, we can talk with WIDA about that and see, you know, what the demand would be and what the possibilities would be with new technology. So I just want to thank you and all of the CCTA staff for your work on this.
Thank you,
Thank
Chris.
you. Appreciate your comment.
And you know, the other, along that same line, when you look at the environmental impact of dredging and things like that, that's a pretty difficult task to do in the world that we live in now. That it seems that technology is out there. And as Chris said, I think in the future, that's probably what ferry service is going to be. First of all, it's smoother riding, whether it be hovercraft or hydrofoil. And those are used all over the world, and they're very successful. Yeah, Chris?
Yeah, I was recently at a meeting with some of the folks from WITA, and one thing that was pointed out was if you did a hovercraft, you don't really need an expensive dock, you know, because it can come right up. So maybe you just have a less expensive ramp. So the technologies will change over time, and we should just, you know, keep our minds open.
Yeah. Sue?
So I'm going to follow up a little bit on Scott's comment that the demand for the service seems to be modest at best. And so, you know, I'm kind of looking, I mean, hey, I lived in Tiburon for my first year here. I loved taking the ferry. So I love the concept of taking ferries to work. But it's got to make sense, you know, time-wise and money-wise. In our current sort of financially very constrained transit system, to add something that doesn't have high demand, and we don't know what the subsidy is, we don't have the money to do any of this. So I'm kind of concerned about sort of moving forward with pilots and stuff if we actually don't have the money to do any of this. And, you know, I see where some of the local money is coming from, and there's a lot of people vying for that same money. And so I just think we have to really look whether, you know, the ridership has not returned to BART to go into San Francisco. And so now we're going to add ferries into San Francisco when BART's not even full. And I think BART's time frame from Pittsburgh Antioch is probably less than the ferries. We have to look at a cost benefit at some point and say, this doesn't make any sense to do because we don't have the money to do this. We really don't. So I just, you know, love the concept of taking a ferry. I just don't know whether we can do any of this. And so I'm very concerned about doing a pilot. We'll do the pilot and then we won't be able to afford doing any of it. And so that'll be the end of it. So I just want us to really think seriously about whether this makes sense to do in the near future until we figure out, you know, where riders are going to be, where the demand's going to be, and where the money can really come from to run this kind of program. And, you know, maybe we pick one site if that's doable, but not necessarily four. And I think we just have to really look at it carefully.
Thank you. Renata?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I want to echo that. And great presentation. Thank you. And thank you for all the work on this. This really did give a wonderful picture of what investment would be required to make this sing. But if I understood what you said, there has been demand potential identified, right? What factors go into determining demand? But there really isn't a demand analysis underlying the study, is there? That wasn't the point.
Right, we were not, we didn't take a quantitative approach. So there's no hard number for coming out from this study.
And is that coming, or what's the next step?
Not part of this study. Given the travel pattern, granted we are kind of normalized now in a way, but the transport demand is very low compared to before the pandemic.
Right.
And the model itself, the more technical side, is not quite ready to do any forecasting, give us a more concrete number for today's condition, for the the remote work, that kind of trend, our model is not capturing it. So I think the next step, if any city is really interested in doing a pilot and really invest in the service, that's when we really, hopefully by then, the model or some kind of new tools will be ready for us to have a better quantitative way to forecast that demand. And this study, what we have, and given the level of study when you do, we're really using a softer concept, a demand potential concept.
Okay, thank you. And, you know, to Sue's point, in terms of funding and what this would cost and where are our dollars best spent, I mean, I think it says here that ferry service would provide affordable transportation options in a region for people who can't afford private transportation. And I think it is true, right, that we would want this to be affordable, right, in order for this to make sense, because part of the idea here is to serve underserved communities, right? Is that right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And WITA's current fare policy also keeps the fare in a much lower compared to before the pandemic, right? So that's the direction they're going, and that has really helped them regain the ridership. And so the affordable is, we're talking about the fare itself, not the cost.
Right. And so how much for them, what's their experience? What's their fare box recovery?
Mike, do you think you can help answer the question? Is Mike still on?
Hi, Mike Gowerty with San Francisco Bay Ferry. Thanks for the question. You know, it's always a story of pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. Pre-pandemic with the premium kind of fare structure we had, where the ferry service was generally more expensive than the bus rail services in the corridors we operated. Transbay travel demand was at a peak. The bridges were packed, bar was packed. You know, our boats were packed. We were leaving people behind. System-wide, we were recovering 60, 70, 75% fare box recovery or fare box expenses on an annual basis. And that's on par with the highest transit systems in the country at the time, which include BART, Caltrain, MTA, the New York City system. Post-pandemic, as Ying accurately mentioned, our board made not only a business decision, but I think a value-based decision to broaden the market appeal of our services. And so we lowered the fares and you know, created parity with the BART and bus services that operate in similar corridors that we operate. And obviously, Transbay demand's been slow to recover. Our riderships come back relatively at a higher clip than the regional operators. So the results of all those factors, we're sitting at about 30% now. So about half of what we're at. And part of that is due to the decision to make the fares more affordable, but more than anything, it's the lag in ridership recovery. Hopefully that wasn't a longer answer than you expected.
It was the perfect answer. Thank you.
Can I just
Tim,
just chime in on the ridership? So I think the study itself was intended to do like a report card on each of the locations, and I think what we can do is learn from that report card and really understand what each of the cities can do to actually attract ferry service to their city, you know, and so. I think if you look at the ridership demand potential, it was a qualitative analysis, but there's definitely in the areas where I'll say it was either, you know, neutral or orange, there may be opportunities to increase that, you know, based on whether the land use, housing, affordable house, et cetera. I think there's additional opportunities to look at how to really attract ferry service to that community. So I think that in some ways, it really kind of, again, gave each city that report card of exactly what they would have to do to really make ferry service kind of feasible in that location. And then on the ridership, even if you were, now we had limited resources. That's kind of how we did the demand potential. And, you know, if we would have had, you know, a bigger budget, we could have done a quantitative analysis. But I think that what we have learned about ferry service is ridership is somewhat unpredictable, because with Richmond ferry service, when we opened that in 2019, and even with the recovery during the pandemic, Richmond exceeded all projections in ridership when we opened up that service in 2019. Like we were experiencing 5-year projections within the first year, and so it's really hard to determine ridership for ferry service, and really the only true way to determine what a ferry service is going to look like is really to do a pilot. That's really the only way to figure out what the ferry service is going to look like, is by doing an actual pilot. And I think I actually applaud WIDA in terms of kind of starting this pilot program, because I think they see it that way as well. Because it's really hard to determine. It's such a unique mode. It's really hard to determine what the ridership is going to be. And so I think doing a pilot is one. This is a case where I think doing a pilot actually makes a lot of sense in terms of understanding what is the business model, how does the ridership going to work in ferry service.
And if you also look at when Richmond started, it was so successful because we had peak demands, peak everything in those days, pre-pandemic, that it was a good alternative. Post-pandemic, it's not appropriate probably to say waiting for recovery. We are where we are. It is this. We're not going to have more people. So the only thing you can do is one agency lowers their fares, it becomes an attractive alternative. So they're taking it away from BART, taking it away from AC Transit for those who still want to get to San Francisco. So the whole concept that was said, do we want to keep building transportation systems to send people to San Francisco when they have a 47% Class A occupancy vacancy? No, the answer is no. It's not a question about recovery. The world we're in, we have our suburbs, and this is throughout the country, people moved to different locations and they're working in different locations. But one of the things it does, first of all, we were obligated to do this. This is important. This is how we got the Richmond Ferry going. And, it's successful. It's a very expensive per passenger proposition. And when you see the relationship, we didn't look at, is there a demand for city to city, right? We're still thinking all of these ferries are going to go from Antioch to Pittsburgh to go to San Francisco. There are opportunities that they would go from city to city. And there's a reason for that. Is Highway 4 getting back, because of development patterns, is it that we're going to have different locations of job centers, which we do? But I'm going to go to Lamar because he's been waiting a long time, then back to Chris.
Oh, no, I can only echo Tim's sentiments because I think that refocused the conversation where it belonged. And that was a study to determine whether or not it made sense for us cities to look at ferry service. I'll remind those of us from East County that the projections for BART were absolutely off. The BART Antioch station is heavily traveled and is one of the yellow line is one of the more frequented train lines on the BART system. And so when you say 90 minutes to San Francisco at rush hour, that's quite the bargain for someone who lives in Antioch, because it takes 2.5 hours to get to San Francisco, and that's on a good day. That's on a good day driving. And so so it's not a question about helping poor people. This is about continuing to preserve and increase the quality of life for people in Eastern Contra Costa County. So this isn't for just low-income people. This is for people who have good quality jobs, are high-income earning folks who work in San Francisco and sit in 2.5-hour commutes. So from our perspective, from my perspective, it makes good sense in terms of having a pilot study to figure out if the demand is there.
Thank you. Chris, and then Federal.
Yeah, I am sort of fascinated by ferries, and I like to ride them now, and I talked to WIDA staff about this. And, there might be possibilities for, as you say, sort of city to city, almost like a water taxi. So I could envision maybe from some of our cities here in Contra Costa going over to Richmond, then people would hop on the Richmond ferry and go into the city. It's a very relaxing way to ride. Also, I would say that WIDA staff has looked at not just bringing everybody to San Francisco, but kind of creating a spider network. and they'll probably be doing different kinds of pilots, talking about maybe eventually having some ferry service that would go over to Marin, you know, and could relieve congestion there. So I think we should just kind of keep our minds open about this.
Yeah, Federal?
Thank you. As someone who's had his mind open on this for over 20 some odd years, and the key component for ferry service to East County, and a lot of that reasons has to do with not only the ridership, but the ability to have emergency services to get people out of that end of the county that may be the only way to get folks out at some point in time. So I'm very disappointed in the numbers that we look at with ferry service, and I agree that we need to do a pilot. We need to do a pilot, because if you're just talking about ridership numbers, that's one thing. You know, when we projected EBART, its projection were 5 years out in terms of the ridership numbers. Day one, it was at overcapacity in terms of ridership, and it remains to be overcapacity.
We did emergency funding to build new parking lots because there wasn't enough capacity.
Absolutely. So let's take all those things in consideration when thinking about transit, other modes of transportation. We cannot omit our water resource that we have available.
Thank you. Any other comments at this point? All right. Ying, thank you. We're going to now go to public comment. Terry-Ann, is there any written or online public comment on this item?
No public comment, written or verbal.
Okay. Is there anybody here present in our room who would like to make public comment? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment. So this is actually information only, sort of giving direction. So to staff, to Ying, Tim, do you have enough? Well, first of all, and again, thank you for this. It's exactly what we need to know, and we know what the challenges are as we go forward. Is there anything else that you need from us on this item? Okay, great. All right, thank you. Thank you very much. All right, this will now take us to item number 9B. And this is also going to be presented by Ying, and this is seeking approval of Transportation Fund for Clean Air 40% fund policy. Ying, welcome back.
Yes, thank you. You have me for this one and the next one. So today we have a staff report to present the Transportation Fund for Clean Air 40% fund policy. My presentation will also include to talk about TDM 2.0, Travel Demand Management 2.0. So I want to just give you some background how we get to the action in front of you. And many of you have probably seen at least big part of this presentation. And I just want to start with just simply restate the goals and objective in doing TDM 2.0. This is how we brand it to really improve our travel demand management program. And many of you are also familiar with what we do TDM program at the countywide level. We brand it as 511 Contra Costa, and is under this brand, and then is currently funded by both Measure J and TFCA funds. CCTA is the oversight agency in funding, and the programs are delivered by 3 sub-regional offices. CCTA on behalf of Central and East County, and West County, the program is managed by WICTAC, and in Southwest County, the program is managed by SWAT through the City of San Ramon staff. And here's the table to show you. Currently, we provide both countywide programs as well as sub-regional programs. The countywide programs, they are available to all residents and travelers in the county, and they are managed by one of the 3 offices. In the next slide, it shows the sub-regional programs, and they are kind of unique to each sub-region, and they are delivered just by one of the offices. The current program is very well received, well supported by the community as well as all of you, the elected officials. And there are a lot of, is well received by the public, and also has some practical benefits. One of them is it helps our cities to comply with the TDM ordinance. So may I continue? But we also have some challenges in our current program. Let me just highlight one of them. We have been allocating funds by practice. For the TFCA program, there's no policy. And so I'll go back to talk about why we're proposing the policy to you. A key thing is actually the last bullet point. Our current practice, we heavily rely on self-reporting data and assumptions in assessing trip and VMT reduction, vehicle miles travel. So under today's practice, we cannot really reliably say how much VMT is reduced from our investment. And this is the area we really want to improve under TDM 2.0. Given the new technologies as well as the current practice, we have many tools available to us to measure and quantify the VMT and emission reduction benefits. For us to move to TDM 2.0 to establish a credible baseline of TDM reduction benefits from our existing program will help us support authority in investing more in TDM reduction, either to support capital project mitigation or for achieving the county-wide VMT reduction goal. So we want to talk about how we get to TDM 2.0. It's pretty grand vision, and we brand it as the improvements we want to achieve. But we think we can break it into several steps. Step one is what is in front of us for the next upcoming fiscal year. That's to improve the current TDM program, look for some opportunities to improve without making huge changes. And the second part of the step one is to adopt the TFCA policy. And step two, which put us in next year, we plan to develop a TDM strategic plan that will really give a comprehensive evaluation of our existing program and services, and really learn from the industry best practices to help us be better in how we deliver the services to our residents. And step three, that's put us in FY 26-27. We think that's when we can have the full implementation, both from the TDM strategic plan, as well as what we're doing in the next 2 years, kind of our own lessons learned. And I want to share with you, we have quite a bit of engagement, mostly with the RTPCs, to get feedback. I think we started as early as last fall. And then in early this year, in January, February, we have both Tim and I went to many meetings, and we just want to summarize those key feedback we receive. One is the strong desire to maintain the geographic equity in the TFCA fund distribution. And the RTPCs must have a role in advancing those projects for the sub-regions. And there's also a strong desire to continue many existing programs so we can support the cities to meet the TDM ordinance requirements. And there's also the 511 Contra Costa brand that's very important in how we communicate with our customers. And there's also a comment that the timeline is too quick and we're moving too fast. So I want to share with you what we have, based on the feedback, what we have, the draft TDM policy, and how we address some of the comments. And this you probably heard that back in February. I don't think I need to talk about it again. So the key is the TFCA funds come from the Air District, and CCTA is the designated administrating agency for Contra Costa County. Our current practice is to combine the TFCA 40% fund with Measure J Program 17 to, for the most part, to support travel demand management, TDM activities. Our practice is to allocate the funds by a job housing formula to the 4 RTPCs. And we've been doing this for many years, and the fund pays for both the program itself as well as the staff overhead. In the last year, the Measure J funding level was $1 million. And this year, based on your decision in February, there's $1.7 million available to be allocated to projects and programs in the upcoming fiscal year. So in the draft policy, I really want to highlight the fund allocation principles and how we address the comments. The first one is the geographic equity, and that principle states that subregions should receive proportional TFCA benefits based on the job housing formula. So the benefit is calculated as the sum of the TFCA funds to the countywide programs and projects distributed per the formula, and the TFCA funds allocated to the subregional projects. And there's a definition of countywide projects and subregional projects. The policy also defines the roles of the RTPCs as well as the roles of the authority board. The authority board will approve the projects, the funding allocation, as well as the CE finding. CE is cost effectiveness calculation. And I want to highlight there probably has been some understanding on the countywide projects. The countywide projects are not only for CCTAs. CCTA is one of the eligible sponsor agencies, but any other eligible project sponsors can sponsor a countywide project as long as that project is available in all geographic areas. So I just want to clear that misunderstanding. And I want to share with you like some examples of what we mean by countywide versus sub-regional projects. So that's what we heard so far. And I think some of the programs you have seen them before. For example, the Guarantee Ride Home program managed by WICTAC, the Vanpool program managed by SWAT. Pass to Class is a very popular program. The consensus, we want to maintain that and continue to provide this free student pass. Sub-regional projects, there's some ideas we have heard. In the SWAT region, traffics and Loma Linda school bus programs. Although those are ongoing programs, they're not new programs, but there's opportunities for those programs to receive a bigger share of the TFCA funds because there's some revenue challenges for those 2 programs. So what I learned from SWAT staff is this is very welcoming to be able to receive more TFCA funds. From the Tri-Delta Transit, they expressed the interest in using TFCA funds to support the expansion of the Try My Ride services. So I want to just highlight with you the practice, how we actually do that. Just be honest, this is the first year we're doing it, right? Not everything's been really flushed out. But what we know is we start a call for project process, and the project sponsors can submit their projects. The key is the collaboration after we receive all the projects is the step where CCTA and RTPC staff will collaborate in this process to evaluate the proposed projects and balance our needs, right? Balance the needs to the funds to go to countywide projects versus what is remain for the sub-region portions. So we build in 3 to 4 weeks for this process. And I have received a lot of questions on that, but CCT staff, we really have quite a bit of confidence in this collaboration process based on our working relationship and based on what we all have in common, really want this program to be successful. And in the September-October timeframe, we'll bring the entire program to you, to the authority board for your final approval. And in between the sub-regions, we have to go through their process to recommend the sub-regional projects. I mean, the RTPCs will go through their process to prioritize and and determine the sub-regional projects to be recommended to the authority board. So just this is some probably new information you have seen before, the eligible project types and the eligible project sponsors. And want to just highlight, we talk about there's a desire of like, what does this mean? What does the future program look like, right? Even though we don't have all the answers, we can share some our thinking so far. There is a desire to maintain the 511 Contra Costa brand because that's very, very effective. We have a very wide reach. We want to maintain our website, social media, and our e-newsletter because that's how we communicate with our customers. And we're also, there are 3 programs under today's TDM programs. They will continue because they have other fund sources. Those will not be affected. Those are the Street Smarts Diablo program, Traffic and School and Loma Linda School Bus, as well as the e-buy rebate. And then we want to share with you, this is a concept, again, wondered what it could look like when we talk about, we propose a TFCA policy, when we want to look for improvements in our existing program. So this is, we still need your approval, we're still developing the concept, but I want to share with you what it could look like. This is we call it a big win on transit. It's a $511 of incentive through a random drawing. It's a weekly drawing. So what people, how they participate, they do need to take a transit trip. They have to get themselves on a bus or BART or ferry and show their screenshot of a Clipper card. So the more you ride, the more trips you get on transit, the more chance you get to win this grand prize. There are several benefits in this program. One is we're talking about verifiable trips. They're not just a pledge, not just saying, oh, I'm going to take transit. People do have to ride transit to have a chance to win. And it's very buzzworthy. This get a lot of people ask, what is this about, right? That is really helpful for us to communicate with the public because we think we really want to have something new and exciting and get people to either try to ride transit or ride more or maintain or stay on our system longer rather than try to buy a used car and like give up on transit. So we also bring in a Spare the Air, that kind of theme to it. On the Spare the Air Day, we'll probably throw in more prizes. That is something to be worked on. So we think this can replace some of the current programs. For example, the $25 card when people pledge to drive less, because the current program is really relies on self-reporting, right? So, and this new idea will rely on actual trips taken on transit. So just want to give you a preview of what it could look like if we change some of the programs. And we will maintain as a bundle, right? We want to maintain other events and activities that help us engage our community. So the next steps, we map out how we go from here to September. And it's, you can see the schedule has some like a range to it. With your approval, if you approve the TFCA policy, we're ready to do call for project tomorrow morning. And we'll allow 4 weeks to for the project sponsors to submit projects. Many of them have already talked to us already. Many of them have worked on the CE calculations, which is the more challenging piece. And in June, and I would say second part of May and June, that's when we do this process of collaboration with this RTPC staffs, as well as with input from the project sponsors. So we think in the early part, we can come back to you in July. It's sort of ambitious. We probably will come back to you in September timeframe. So that's the next steps. Just want to come back to the item in front of you is to approve the TFCA 40% fund policy. With that, I'm wrapping up my presentation and happy to answer your questions.
Ying, thank you. Maybe I'm the only one, but I want to ask a question. For the $1 million that we have in the budget now, does that all go to 511? Is that being spent?
The $1 million for Measure J Program 17, that goes to all 4 sub-regions. That's the Program 17 money.
Okay, so the 1.7 that's allocated, I'm just not clear on, the numbers don't make sense, sorry. You know, we're talking about what we were doing sort of, but we didn't say what we were spending on that. And it's not really clear to me what's going away. I know we're revamping this. So is there a short version of this? Because, I mean, do you guys get it? I don't. I just sort of missed, I see all of this stuff. For $1.7 million, what you're describing is about $1 million worth of labor to administer. This is a long list of stuff. You know, $511 on a weekly drawing, that's in the weeds. You know, I thought the RTCPs were the ones that were coming up with what they were going to do. So I apologize, I'm missing the overall, what are we trying to accomplish? I understand vehicle miles traveled, we're trying to, it's environmental, but I don't quite get, what is the 1.7 million? We're going to make all of that available for project requests?
Yeah. So
and then you talked about allocation. Is it really on allocation or is it only on project request?
So I think there's several questions I heard. One is what we use the money for. So here's the 2 tables. That's what we've been using. Last year's total amount between the 2 programs, Measure J Program 17 and TFCA, $2.5 million in the current fiscal year. So those are the activities we deliver on these 2 tables. The top is the countywide, the bottom is the sub-regional. And the second question, what we're addressing here, the TFCA policy addresses how the authority board wishes to allocate the $1.7 million in TFCA. Yeah, we're not proposing to change how we allocate the Measure J Program 17.
Okay, so is that 1.7 million? That's what all of this change is about. Is that only available to those who submit projects, or is it money allocated to the 4 RTCPs?
So the policy is for us you to set the framework, set the policy guidance, the rules of the game, how we use that.
What are the rules? Are they based on the formulas, are allocated to each of the 4 regions, and are they only by project request? That's the 2 questions.
Yeah, that's actually very relevant. So the entire amount has to be associated with projects. And what we're proposing now is the countywide projects would take a share. The rest of them will go to sub-regions and let the sub-regions, the RTPCs, decide how they want, what projects they want to fund. So at the end, you will see a group of projects. Some of them are available countywide. Some of them are only available to certain sub-regions.
So of the 1.7 million, and again, this is a raindrop in the ocean. Of the 1.7 million, how much is for countywide?
Well, that one we don't set a limit on it because we will.
Could all go to that?
Yeah, maybe I could just hop in here really quick. Okay. So the main whole thing about this is to really emphasize the collaboration that actually is already going on in the current process, you know, and so really what happens today is each of the subregions, so the $1.7 million gets divided up by the four subregions by housing and formula, right? And so what's been going on today is each of the RTPCs would go through and say, hey, CCTA, this is what we're going to use the funds for, right? And there really hasn't been a policy or guidance in terms of how we're going to report on that other than the cost effectiveness ratio for the Air District. And so, and the existing countywide programs, if you can go back to that really quick. The existing countywide programs. These are sub-regional, go back, yeah. So the existing countywide programs, this is what's currently funded by the $2.7 million, the 1 million and the 1.7. So these are all the countywide programs. And so the way these programs get decided is by CCTA and the RTPCs. Today, there's no threshold between countywide and sub-regional. There is no threshold between the two. It's collaboratively decide among the RTPCs. So like, for example, West County today they do guaranteed ride home program for the entire county, And so there's a countywide benefit that West County is actually doing it. So the split between countywide projects and sub-regional projects, it's done collaboratively between the RTPCs and CCTA. Today, there's no split. Even today, the RTPCs and CCTA could come back and say, we want to use all of it for countywide programs. I mean, this policy honestly doesn't change a whole lot it just really memorializes what's happening today, and it honestly enhances the collaboration that needs to continue to happen. I think
accountability standards.
Yeah, the biggest change is the accountability piece in the individual programs. That's the biggest change in this policy because today we're allowing, so Air District and their cost effectiveness ratio essentially allows for self-reporting. Right? And so the big why in all of this, and this is what we've been explaining to the RTPCs, is from a regulatory standpoint, and because of this whole VMT mitigation thing for like Innovate 680, the playing field has changed based on current state policy. And so if we're going to leverage TDM as a mitigation strategy for VMT, we need to have hard data on these programs. We need to know exactly how many trips, how many rides, how many miles we're reducing in each of these programs. And so the accountability piece is probably the biggest change in all of this. And the way the cash flows today doesn't necessarily change all that much in the future. It still goes to countywide programs, it still goes to sub-regional programs, and it'll still be done collaboratively among CCTA. And I think the way I would say the other change of the policy is really just the formality of this call for projects. That's the other kind of big change here. And so I think what we're looking for is, like, for example, WCTAC, they will probably submit guaranteed ride home for the entire county. And so they're going to submit a countywide program. And then SWAT will submit probably van pool program on behalf of the entire county. And so collectively and collaboratively between the 4 subregions, we will talk about the countywide programs. And then after we decide collectively between CCTA and the RTPCs what countywide programs we're going to offer, then that'll decide how much remaining funds will go to each of the subregions so they can identify what each of the subregional programs there are. So
thank you for that. And I
so
apologize.
that's kind of those are kind of the big changes in what's happening here.
I was lost.
No, I've already been through this twice with them, so I'm still, let's say we keep all those countywide programs. How much of the 1.7 is already gone?
Approximately.
You mean keep the ones on here?
Yeah, if you keep
Just
so
the
I'm
countywide
assuming
ones.
we keep a good portion of those countywide programs. Guaranteed ride home, van pool, 511, I'm just guessing a good portion of them. So how much of the 1.7 is already spent on that?
We haven't ran the number, but will be probably more than half.
So then we're really looking at 700,000 to be potentially divided up between 4 RTPCs.
Generally, each RTPC will get roughly about $250,000 to $350,000 per RTPC.
Okay, and because my RTPC doesn't manage mine, I have no idea. Right?
Yeah. So that's generally how much they get.
That's another issue. If we don't manage our RTPC, and you guys are doing it for us, do we have to take that back over? Because otherwise, are you going to propose plans for just Transpac that?
You're the only ones that do that, always have.
Well, Transpac and Transplan. So
no, WCTAC and so CCTA manages it for Transpac and Transplant. So
As a
we don't.
combine. Okay.
And so WCTAC and SWAT manages their own. And so I'm saying, does that mean that Tim has to come up with plans for Transpac and Transplan individually that are not countywide for our share?
That's what we do today.
We
already do that today. Yeah. So what we would do is.
And then I'm not aware of it.
Yeah. So we already do that today.
So we do a good job, right?
What would happen? We already do that today. So again, that's what I'm trying to say is this policy doesn't really change a whole lot other than the accountability piece, and as well as I think memorializing the collaboration that needs to happen to make this work. And so I think that what we do today in Transpac and Transplan is we collaborate with Matt Todd, the executive director, and we sit there and say, hey, these are the programs we're proposing, and then we bring those to Transpac, and Transpac approves those. So that's what happens
I've
today.
been on that 8 years, and I don't think I've ever heard one.
Well, that's interesting. Okay,
So
but that's what I know. That's what
that
happens. I
worries
mean,
me a
talking
little
with
bit.
Matt. So yeah.
Yeah, and so then the other thing is the cost effectiveness measure. And I want to make sure that's just a small piece of it, because, you know, I look at 511 Contra Costa and the Summer Bike Challenge and some of the bike programs that they have for the students and stuff. You're not going to be able to measure a VMT mitigation from that, right? I mean, I don't know how you do that. So, but they're super important in the long run because they're getting kids used to riding bikes and walking to school and things like that. It's a super effective and exciting program. And how do we make sure that those types of programs get proposed and funded even though they don't meet any cost effectiveness?
So,
I think
I think on that one, sorry, Ying, but I think, and we've talked about this, I think, with all the RTPCs, is we know there's really great programs like Street Smarts that promote safety on our roadways and educate students on how to ride bikes. And, you know, we do these great challenges that promote, you know, different types of modes. And so the intent is to really continue to do those types of programs. I think what we're trying to do is, and I've mentioned this, I think, to multiple RTPCs, is that what that does is we want to continue doing those programs. But what that does is it incentivizes us to pick really cost-effective programs to reduce VMT. So that way it does, you know, leave money behind, if you will, to fund those types of programs, you know, like Street Smarts. You know, so it's really focusing on the return on investment to make sure that we're picking programs that have a high amount of VMT. So, like, for example, and I'm not suggesting that any our programs do this, but let's say, for example, we already have an existing program and we evaluate it under the new policy based on new accountable data, and we find out that this program reduced, you know, 100 VMT, right? And so, and then then we find out that another program is reducing 1,000 VMT. Well, maybe what we need to do is invest more in that program, so that way there's more money available to the I'll call the safe or soft programs that do not necessarily reduce VMT. So it's going to be a balance between VMT reduction and also continuing to fund the softer programs that don't reduce VMT. I don't think there's any intent to really change much of the existing programs. I think as mentioned, like in the schedule, I think what we want to do is basically take the existing program and take these new accountability measures and kind of use it as a sieve with our existing programs and better understand what is working and what's not working, what's a higher return on investment, what's not. And then we can make other decisions in the next fiscal year in terms of how we may potentially want to modify, you know, programs to address some of these new goals relative to VMT reduction. But I think the first year is mainly focused on how do our existing programs even work and how are they reducing VMT, and get more knowledgeable of that based on better and verifiable data.
And does anybody know how what's the formula? What's the jobs population formula?
That's actually equal with the number of jobs and a number of residents in each subregion. So for Transpac region, you account for about 30%. So it's almost equal, but slightly different.
And my other question really on proposing a policy to approve, I'm not sure I see where the policy is written.
It was attached to the resolution.
Oh, that's why I don't see it. I thought it was going to be in the presentation, more definitively what that is. Okay.
Yeah, it's in the resolution, and we just highlight really the heart of the policy is the fund allocation principles.
Okay. I think what I hear too is that if it gets down to it's really the $700,000 that's approximately left. God, it sounds like we're creating a lot of work of reporting.
I'm with you.
I just worry that falls upon our own personal staffs to do that. I don't, you know, if it was a traffics program or a program like that, that's easy. We quantify that. You take a child to school, you take, 50,000 trips, you can calculate how many vehicle miles you have. That's real easy. A lot of these other programs, teaching kids and encouraging them to ride bikes, all you can say, well, we met this many kids. We don't know how many of them are going to ride bikes. I don't know how you can do that. And that reporting part of it, it might not be worth, I hate to say this, it might not be worth doing the program because they're such small dollars. And I mean, some of these programs are $20,000, $25,000.
So may I answer the question? So under TFCA, the reporting is always in place. Your staff has been doing that.
Yeah, but it's not what you're talking about. You're talking about a new reporting system that is a much deeper dive. That's what I hear.
No, the reporting requirements are the same. We just,
So what your presentation should say is, there are no changes in the reporting system. We don't need to talk about it.
no, it's the change in the policy. So today's practice, we provide the funds to all 4 subregions under, let's just talk about TFCA, right? We divide it to all 4 subregions, and they do whatever projects that are eligible under TFCA, the Air District's guidance. So there's not much of an incentive to make those changes. And with the new policy, they still have to submit the project forms, still have to submit the calculations. That part hasn't changed. But there's a greater emphasis of using verifiable data, hard data,
That means
instead
the
of.
reporting has changed. Sorry to interrupt. That means the reporting has changed.
Self-reporting, there still takes work to do self-reporting data.
No, I get that.
Yeah, I think, so, again, think of this as like, I'll call it a pilot for this first year, because what we need to do is go through the existing programs and understand what is the best way and most efficient way to kind of collect data from these programs. And like for example, one of the things that we could do in the future is have a mobile app. And I think one of the big things about this policy and about kind of thinking about the future is modernizing some of our existing programs. A lot of our existing programs are actually still being done by paper, by website, by form. And so if TDM, in my mind, TDM is the future. It is the future of getting people into alternative
I
modes.
think we agree with that. We spend millions of dollars on consultants,
And
millions we did tonight, and we have about a $700,000 program that I'm seeing a disconnect. And
There's also no policy in there.
yeah, and I don't see any policy here.
well, it's attached to the PC packet. So if it went to the PC, you got to go back to PC.
You have to go back.
Yeah. That's all our packets are.
Well, no, all of our subcommittee reports are supposed to be attached, and it's not. It's not attached. All the other ones have. On APC, you can also see the APC report. That's what we usually have.
Okay.
I'm going to suggest this unless anybody else, that we've spent more time on this of questions and things that maybe I would consider we ought to continue this item if we could.
Okay, that's fine.
And to maybe bring that forward so we can see that, and maybe reflect a little bit on some of the comments and why some of us been here for a while, there seems to be a little misunderstanding about what the ask is, and maybe come back with a simpler version of what we want to do. And I think we all agree with TDM. We're all on that page. It just seems to be focused a lot of energy on a really tiny, tiny little series of programs. And how do we do that? And we say it's not more reporting, but we say it is. So if that's, is there a?
I'll move to continue.
Yeah. Okay, so before we do that, we do have to take, I apologize, we need to take public comment on this. Is there any comments either in written or online on this item? Terry Ann?
No public comment, written or verbal.
Is there anybody here tonight who would like to speak on this? Yes, Bruce, please come forward. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. There's no mic.
Oh, that's.
You went for a mic, and there is none.
Thank you. Bruce Olson, Mr. Bicycle from East County. We're talking about encouraging people out of their cars. We have to have alternatives. to put people in or on bicycles, we have to have places that are safe to ride. We've built a lot of bike lanes. In fact, the state has changed the rules about resurfacing and restriping streets to include bike lanes on just about every street that gets restriped. However, over the past almost 100 years, we have built our transportation system to be especially encouraging of driving cars, so we haven't built a lot of bike lanes. So for somebody to ride their bicycle, and as an aside, I rode my bicycle from Pittsburgh to this meeting tonight, and I was on the freeway between Willow Pass Road interchange and Port Chicago Highway interchange because that was the only safe route. As another alternative aside, I'd like to say I've been stopped by law enforcement on that segment of freeway more often than I have seen other bicyclists on that segment of freeway. I'm on that piece of freeway about once a week, starting in 2006. I've been stopped 24 times by law enforcement. But that's an aside. What we have to do is provide a safe place for people to ride bicycles. That's the bottom line right there. If we have a 3-mile-long piece of arterial that has a nice shoulder or a marked bike lane, that's wonderful. But if we have a 1-block segment where there is nothing leading to whatever it is, a major intersection of 2 arterial streets, we're going to have rational adults saying, I would ride my bicycle, but it's too dangerous, just because of that one block long segment where there's nothing for the bicyclist. Thank you.
Bruce, thank you. Are there any other comments from those that are in the room tonight? Seeing none, then we'll close the public hearing on this. Any further comment? Paul? Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one comment if we are going to continue this item, that I think some of you know that in West County, in WCTAC, we got hit pretty hard with our constituents with the possibility that change might hurt their local programs. And Chris Kelly and I have been responsive to our constituents, and we've seen those programs work out in West County, which happens to be the place where it has the highest percentage of people that vote for transit ballot measures in this county. So we want to keep those people happy. But I'm really, so this will continue on, but I want to just appreciate Tim and the work that his staff did to get a better collaboration model to our various 4 segments, because it wasn't good for a while, and Tim worked really hard to get it there. We're talking, and I think that kind of collaboration, and that's the key word here going forward, whatever comes simpler, a simpler recipe, simpler formula, but we're at the point of knowing that collaboration works, and there are programs locally that are important if we're going to move toward a ballot measure in the future.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Paul. We agree. I think this time will just give us a little bit, for some of us who don't sit on our TCP, to just get brought up to speed so this is clear. We're headed the right direction, no question. A little fine-tuning and a little simpler criteria, that would help. With that, Terry, would you call the roll, please?
Sorry, I heard a motion by Commissioner Nowak to continue the item to a future meeting. Who was the second? Glover? Thank you. Okay. Commissioner Fideli?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover? Aye. Commissioner Haskew? Oh, absent. Commissioner Kelly?
Aye.
Commissioner Meadows?
Aye.
Commissioner Nowak?
Oops, yes.
Commissioner Perkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Sauce?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hernandez-Thorpe?
Aye.
Chair Arnrich? Motion passes with Commissioners Carlson and Haskew absent.
Thank you. Good evening again. For the third item, I'm having some help from Kate Sargent from Sam's Works. Many of you have met her at the board workshop in October. So she's going to, we use this opportunity to give you an update on the development of the integrated transit plan. So Kate.
Okay, great, thank you. And then, okay. Is it showing? Are we sharing our screen?
On the wrong screen, let's do stop share. All right. Here we go.
Okay, great. Thank you for letting me present to you today. My presentation is going to cover some updates for where we are with the integrated transit plan. We're currently in the action plan phase, so I'll give you an idea about where we are with that, as well as some takeaways from our workshops with the transit operators and the proposed budget amendment for this project. So to give you an idea of where we are in the project schedule, the action plan is building on the market analysis that was conducted to start this project. And so the market analysis looked at transit demand relative to supply. It looked at population and job centers. It also looked at existing survey data about who uses transit and how they would like transit to improve. And so we created a whole analysis around this. We also did a framing workshop with key stakeholders on the project to present the market analysis and to also get feedback on potential opportunities that people already have in mind to improve transit in the county, and did some initial screening. In January, we did these workshops with the transit operators so that we could sit down with our preliminary recommendations and get into the weeds with them in terms of the recommendations within each of their service territories. And then coming out of those workshops, the Project Oversight Committee, which is the transit operators and MTC, together with CCTA staff, decided that we needed to take a deeper dive to identify latent demand in the county, to identify where transit improvements can be targeted. We're also including LAVTA service on I-680 in our market analysis and recommendations. And then also there was a recommendation to not only rely on existing survey data, but to conduct a new public survey that actually asks people how they use transit today and what they want to see as the future of transit in the county. So coming out of this additional analysis, we'll then refine our action plan project list and create packages of improvements. And then following this timeline that you see here, the project will enter another phase where we develop capital projects based on the action plan recommendations, and we'll do a cost-benefit analysis. So I'll show you some of our action plan here today, but these will get refined over the course of this additional analysis, as well as the cost-benefit analysis that's going to follow. So the framework of our action plan includes identifying a core transit network for the county. So that includes regional services like BART, Amtrak, and Ferry. It includes identification of transit priority corridors in the county, as well as frequent bus corridors. And the difference between transit priority corridors and frequent bus corridors is just that transit priority corridors also include planned infrastructure improvements like bus lanes, transit signal priority, and the like. And so that is what comprises our recommendation for a core transit network in the county. And then we also have recommendations around access-focused services to access that core transit network, which can include microtransit, car share, active transportation, mobility hubs, and autonomous transit network. And so this gives you just a bit of an idea of how we're thinking about the context for each of these as well. So, for example, transit priority corridors can serve both regional and local trips. Frequent buses, we're thinking of it more focused on local trips, and then microtransit, active transportation, and ATN, more so access to the core network, and then mobility hubs as the connection points between the core transit network and the access points. So just to get a bit specific, so at this point in time, this is our proposed transit priority corridor map. And so and actually the frequent bus corridor map as well. So the gold are the transit priority corridors where we would propose the additional infrastructure improvements, and the purple is where we would just propose more frequent service. And so we, to come up with this, we looked at existing productivity and ridership, population density, job density. To distinguish between transit priority corridors and frequent bus network, we also looked at traffic congestion as well as right-of-way width to identify, the opportunities to actually install infrastructure. And then these are our proposed access improvement zones. So these, and each of them is anchored by at least one mobility hub, shown as a blue dot. And the yellow dots are the existing, or the Innovate 680 mobility hubs that have already been proposed. And so the blue mobility hubs would be sort of the more countywide scale mobility hubs. But in addition, we're going to be planning for a network of local mobility hubs as well as we dive further into the project. So these access improvement zones were identified based on population and job density, based on recommended improvements in the countywide bike and ped plan that have not been implemented yet, and travel demand in general. And so the exact mix of services that could be within any of these access improvement zones haven't been, that level of detail is still yet to come in terms of whether this would be microtransit, bike, ped improvements, local access bus service, et cetera. So in January, we met with the operators, and we looked at each of these access improvement zones, each of these corridors, and went into detail with the operators. Some of the key takeaways from those meetings was that we got clearer definitions for the elements that we're including in the action plan, so we really drilled down on the definitions for each of these elements that I was showing you. We also made some updates to the transit priority corridors based on their particular knowledge of the markets. And then we made some access to the improvement zones, such as adjusting the mobility hub locations, and got some feedback from the operators that we should prioritize emerging mobility where it complements and doesn't replace existing bus service. And so, should I turn it over to you here? Okay.
Thank you, Kate. So I just want to highlight the what we present to you, the transit priority corridors as well as the frequent bus network. Those are still in the draft format, and this is based on the team's work plus the input from the transit operators. The other thing we heard is some additional scope they want us to look at: latent demand analysis, inclusion of the LAFTA service along 680. We want to bring in another transit agency, but just narrowly focusing on the 680 corridor. And then we also plan to conduct a public survey to really complement the current market service assessment we have already completed. So once we finish those tasks, we'll go back and revisit the action plans, those transit priority corridors. You can assume like we're about 95% there, right? We do want to do this additional work to really round out the picture because there are still a few small data gaps. So what we're proposing is to add the addition to the scope, and with the proposed change in the budget, there's a total increase of $244,170 $1,000,000.99. So the total new budget will be over $2 million. So this is a minimum one to accommodate additional scope of work. And we do have already contingency built in. One of the items we plan to do that we estimate will be $200,000. We decide to do it in this way, do the latent demand analysis as well as the public survey. And the LAFTA inclusion will be very beneficial because they are a partner in when we apply for the TIRSUP grant, and this project is also funded by the TIRSUP grant. So we think this is a very reasonable increase to expand the scope to make our analysis more complete. So our staff recommendation is for the chair to execute the Amendment 1 to agreement Section 30 with Samsworth in this amount. So with that, we are here to answer your questions.
Thank you for that. Is there any questions? Sue?
So not really a question, but one, thank you, because I think this is super important. You know, in our discussions at MTC about talking about better coordination, better, you know, transit performance, better focus on the rider, I think Contra Costa is sort of ahead of the game in working on this plan. And I know that the MTC staff have been, you know, pleased to see what we have done on the ITP. And I hope when they start looking at these consolidation issues, 9 Bay Area wide, they take a look at our ITP and sort of start from that type of concept and that coordination. So I really appreciate that. I think it's also great that we include LAFTA. You know, one of my arguments at MTC when they talk about consolidation is they tend to draw county lines, and that's just not the way people function. They just don't stop at a county line and then say, okay, I can't go outside that wall. So, you know, and LAFTA, you know, and County Connection have done a great job coordinating on the one-seat ride. And so I really think it's important to include LAFTA in here. So, again, just kudos for being out ahead of the game on this ITP and really being a sort of role model for the rest of the Bay Area on how to coordinate items and issues on transit. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to move the item.
Great. Thank you, Sue. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, before we do that, let's see if there are any public comments. Terry, is there anybody online or in writing?
No public comment, virtual or in writing.
Okay. Is there anybody here in the room tonight who'd like to make public comment? Seeing none, then we'll close the item. And is there a second?
I'll second.
Oh, okay. It's been moved by Nowak, seconded by Scott. Any further comment? Seeing none, Terry, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Commissioner Fideli?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover? Aye. Commissioner Kelly?
Aye.
Commissioner Meadows?
Aye.
Commissioner Nowak?
Yes?
Commissioner Perkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Sauce?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hernandez-Thorpe?
Aye.
Chair Arnrich?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously with Commissioners Carlson and Haskew absent.
Great. Ying, thank you again for this. Thank you both. We appreciate the input and look forward to the results. All right, this will take us to item number 10, correspondence and communications. And is there any, no, everything is there. Associated reports, item 11, bless you, and authority board staff comments. I have no comments. Is there any comments from any board member? Seeing none. And now ex officios, any comments or? All right, and back to our executive director, Tim.
Awesome. Thank you, Chair Arnrich. So first and foremost, wanted to introduce one of our new employees and welcome her to the Authority Board. As you remember, the Authority Board last fall, was really focused on approving and creating this Office of Accessibility and Equity. And there was direction from the Authority Board to hire a program manager, but also hire an administrative assistant. And so I'm proud to introduce Deanna Blakesley. And she comes to us from Delta Diablo. She is a resident of Contra Costa County, lives in the city of Brentwood, and spent a lot of her time in the public sector. She also worked at the city of Antioch. And so just want to give the opportunity for Deanna just to say a few words to the authority board and welcome her to the team.
Welcome, Deanna.
Thank you, Chair Arnrich and Commissioners, and is this on?
Yeah,
okay.
should be.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here as a new employee at CCTA. And I'm very excited to be supporting the programs department and the admin team, as well as the BTC and the PCC committee. So I came from Delta Diablo, as Tim mentioned. I've been there for about 7+ years. Prior to that is with the City of Antioch, and City of Concord prior to that. I used to live in the City of San Jose. I worked for the redevelopment agencies down there as well before they closed. So very excited to be here supporting CCTA and their transportation. I guess fun fact about myself, a little personal. I'm a pilot. I've been flying since I was 15 years old. So transportation has always fascinated me. And so anyway, I'm very happy to be here and support our team. So thank you very much for having me.
Welcome aboard.
And just some other announcements. So Chair Arnrich, Vice Chair Hernandez-Thorpe, also see Commissioner Fideli and Commissioner Kelly. We all attended the East Bay Innovation Awards, and we received this fantastic award. It's the basically Legacy Award from East Bay EDA, so it was a really exciting evening. We also sponsored the event, so we got a lot of, I think, just great recognition of our community and East Bay and what we do at CCTA. And was a really great event, and just wanted to share that with you, and that'll go into our wonderful case full of all of our awards and so forth. The other thing I wanted to share is the McCollum Bridge pedestrian overcrossing. That was a huge success. For those of you that missed it, we had this really cool board and had everyone basically sign it and give their comments about the project, and it was a kind of a fantastic little memento that we get to walk away with, and just want to appreciate Lindy putting this together. We're thinking about just hanging these on the walls in the office for the next ribbon cuttings and so forth. But this was for such a small project. This project was roughly about $11 million, $12 million, and it was probably had some of the most attendance of the public and ever. We had probably over 150 people attend this event. Kind of the same scale as the Caldecott Tunnel, as a matter of fact. So really, really cool, really special, and it was a great day, and was glad to share it with everyone. And I think we got a lot of great recognition about the great work we're doing at CCTA. And then real quick, an update on Gomentum Station. So we've had a successful transfer from AAA to Next Generation Mobility. So we now are operating Gomentum Station as of April 1st. We did send a letter to AAA kind of celebrating our partnership. Terry Ann sent that out in the handout this afternoon, just kind of celebrating the partnership and the work that we've been doing over the last 5 years. And so we are still in the process of really two things. One is renewing the AV sublicense with the Navy, and then another thing is we'll be renewing our MOU with the city. So those are kind of two things that will be coming up here pretty soon. And then lastly, surprisingly, the Ty Ginsburg Associate team has just walked in the door. So Jason Ty, Matt Ginsburg, Andrew Perlstein. So we've been spending a lot of time with them in DC, and just really appreciate their support. But we had some great meetings in DC last week at the APTA Ledge conference, and then also in March, as indicated in the executive director report. And it's also, again, just fascinating to kind of see when we walk into these meetings that they just know who we are, they know exactly what we're doing, and tremendously, we are really advisor to these agencies. I think most agencies come in asking for something, and in some ways, I think we're there actually giving them advice about their programs and projects. And to the extent that I had a meeting with the Undersecretary, the Secretary of Transportation, Carlos Monge, and he was excited to meet with us. He was excited to hear about what we're doing with workforce development. Also excited to hear about our regulatory framework from NHTSA that we proposed in NHTSA. So again, we're just adding value to these agencies. And likewise, I was invited to a small workshop with FTA and the acting administrator 2 weeks ago to really get advice from innovative agencies like CCTA in terms of how to implement these projects and programs. So it's really exciting again to see how well we're received. And like when we met with Veronica Vanderpool, She's the acting administrator. I swear, there was a 25-page document, full briefed of CCTA in front of her. And so they know exactly who we are, what we're doing, and she had some very well-planted questions from staff about our projects and programs. So it was really, really good. It was funny. It's like, well, we have questions for you. She's like, well, I've got questions for you. So it was really, really good. So again, thank you for the board. Thank you for the great support. Really exciting, and happy to take any questions or comments from the board.
Tim, one other thing to mention, we also had a groundbreaking in Pittsburgh for the new pedestrian bicycle Class 1 Bruce Trail to connect from on Railroad, Parallels Railroad, to go from the regional trail to the BART station. That was on Friday.
That'll be in my next executive director report.
Yeah. Oh, come on, it just happened. It's, you know. All right, great, Tim, thank you. And with that, any other comments from anybody before we adjourn this meeting? And again, thank you all. Thank you, Ying, for going through 3 items tonight. You took the lion's share here, and we appreciate it. So with that, this meeting is adjourned.